My name is Alexis, and I'm 29 years old. I juggle my career between working from home and commuting to the office. My husband, Bruce, is also 29, and while we share a loving marriage, there's one thing that complicates our relationship: his mother, Doris. Doris has always treated me coldly, and over the years, I've learned to navigate her harshness. Still, despite these challenges, Bruce and I recently celebrated our second wedding anniversary, and I take pride in how we've managed to grow together. Professionally, my work has become a source of solace, a place where I feel valued and empowered. It's also led to multiple promotions, a rare achievement for women in my field. Currently, I'm in Europe for a business trip, attending several high-stakes meetings. One afternoon, during an important session, my phone, which had been set to silent, began vibrating insistently. It was unusual, and with 5 missed calls from Doris, I suspected something urgent. I stepped outside to call her back, but just as I dialed, the phone rang again. "Where are you?" Doris's voice came through, sharp and annoyed. I hesitated before responding, her tone already grating on me. "Hi, Doris, everything okay?" I asked, trying to be polite. "Where are you?" she repeated, her impatience cutting through. I sighed, disliking the confrontation but knowing I had to keep my cool. "I'm in a meeting, Doris, on a business trip. Can we talk later?" Bruce told me. "But what are you doing? Leaving your husband at home? You need to come back, now," she snapped. Her demand was typical, unreasonable and sudden, but I remained calm. "I can't, Doris. I'm in the middle of something very important right now." "You're always so controlling," she said with a bitter laugh. "You're just Bruce's wife, you know. Don't act like you're the one making the decisions. Come home now." Her words stung, but I was determined not to let her derail my focus. "Do you realize today's importance?" I asked, trying to make her understand. She smirked, her tone dripping with entitlement. "It's my 62nd birthday, of course." Her announcement threw me off. I had thought her birthday was later in the month. What was even more shocking was that I had spent weeks coordinating a dinner for her at a fancy restaurant when I returned. The fact that she was demanding my presence now, while I was away on business, left me feeling frustrated. "I'm sorry, Doris, but I'm away on a work trip and can't make it back for your birthday," I said, my patience running thin. "That's just like you, always buried in work," she retorted, her voice sharp. "I spoke to Bruce. He took the day off for me. The family will be here. But you, what do you think that makes me feel? And how do you think it makes Bruce feel?" Her words were designed to provoke, and I knew any further engagement would only make matters worse. I had no choice but to end the conversation. "I'm sorry, Doris, but I won't be able to make it to your birthday celebration," I said firmly. Her response was swift and cutting. "Fine, don't bother coming back. You're not part of the family anymore. It's like a divorce. Bruce deserves better than you." Her words hit like a slap, leaving me stunned and angry, but I refused to escalate things further over the phone. I had to focus on the task at hand, and this drama would have to wait. "All right, we'll talk when I get back, but for now, I really have to go," I said, my voice strained. Doris fired back immediately. "What's with the attitude? I told you not to come back. I'll handle things with Bruce myself," she snapped, and then hung up. I stood there for a moment, feeling exhausted from the exchange with my mother-in-law. Taking a deep breath, I returned to my meeting, trying to shake off the tension. 3 more days of non-stop meetings passed, and when I finally made my way home, I was consumed by anger and frustration over the confrontation with Doris. The drive felt like a blur, my mind too preoccupied with everything that had transpired. As I opened the front door, I was greeted by Bruce's tired voice. "Welcome back." I slipped off my heels and made my way into the living room, leaving my luggage by the entrance. It was then that I noticed a sea of cardboard boxes, and there, in the middle of it all, was Bruce, sweating as he taped up the boxes. "What's all this?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. Bruce's voice was heavy as he explained. "These are your things. After Doris's birthday party, when she called you that day, she went on about how you'd neglected her and been rude on the phone. She told everyone that you should be sent back to your parents' house and that she wanted you divorced because you weren't good enough for me." I could hardly believe what I was hearing, but I pressed him for more details. "And then? Did she really tell you to divorce me, and you just agreed to it?" Bruce paused, looking tired and defeated. "I didn't exactly agree," he said slowly, "but she insisted. She told me to pack up your things, and I felt cornered. What else was I supposed to do?" He stopped, looking at me with a mixture of confusion and frustration. "Why didn't you argue with her? Does this mean you're okay with the divorce?" His voice trembled slightly, as if he were bracing for my reaction. I stared at him, feeling the weight of his words. "And your father? Did he just let this happen?" I asked, my voice rising with disbelief. "He's letting your mother control everything, and so are you." Bruce's face was weary. "My dad said, if Doris is upset, It'll be hard on you, just do what she says. So, yeah, I went along with it. I didn't want to make things worse. He looked away, guilt in his eyes. I'm sorry, I didn't want this to happen. I was stunned. The way Bruce seemed to blindly follow his mother's demands made me feel more isolated than ever. What's wrong with your family? I said, my voice shaking with frustration. Your father lets your mother dictate everything, and now you're just doing the same thing. Where does that leave me? Bruce's gaze softened, but it did little to ease my anger. It's not like that. What my mom says is final. Once she calms down, everything will settle. This divorce isn't real. I'll come for you when things are better. He spoke like a child pleading for reassurance, but I felt no sympathy. Instead, I was consumed with a deep sense of loss and confusion. I shook my head, a sinking feeling in my chest. How could a grown man be so terrified of his mother? I thought, my disappointment turning into quiet disbelief. I wondered what I had seen in him all those years ago. But as I stood there, a sudden clarity washed over me. Staying with Bruce meant constant conflict, constant undermining by Doris, and a future where I was never truly accepted. Maybe this was the chance I needed to break free. I was more than capable of taking care of myself. I didn't need to live in a relationship that made me feel small. With that realization, I looked at Bruce and said, firmly, let's go through with the divorce. I picked up my phone and called Doris, my hand shaking slightly. After a few rings, she finally picked up. Hello, Doris? I said softly. Well, finally, she replied, her voice oozing with satisfaction. You've come to your senses. I'm so relieved. You'll be gone, and Bruce will find someone better, someone who's obedient, pretty, and knows how to treat her in-laws. Her words were laced with venom, as if she had won some kind of victory. Don't worry about Bruce. I'll take care of him until he finds a new wife. Her words cut deeper than I expected, but I held my ground. Don't misunderstand, Doris, I said, my voice steady. Oh, you're just a sore loser. Don't worry about Bruce or me, Alexis, she said, her tone dismissive. I've already got the divorce papers from the city office and gave them to Bruce. Don't forget to sign them. She hung up abruptly without another word. Bruce, who had overheard the conversation, seemed oddly relieved. His expression made me question just how aware he was of the situation. By the way, does your mother know you're actually a full-time house husband? I asked, unable to hide the hint of amusement in my voice. Bruce's face hardened, and his tone shifted to something more serious. How could I tell her that? My mother's obsessed with the idea that I'm some high-ranking executive at a prestigious company. I nodded, suddenly understanding. Bruce had always maintained a facade, pretending to live a life he didn't actually lead. At home, he lounged around in faded sweatshirts, but the moment he had to meet Doris, he would don a suit, playing the role of the successful businessman. And Doris? She couldn't get enough of boasting about her son's supposed achievements. At her birthday party, she'd proudly claimed that Bruce was such a devoted son, even taking time off work just to be there for her. She also bragged about his job, implying he could easily find a more obedient and attractive wife than me. It was all a lie, a convenient image she clung to, even if it was far from reality. I'd come to realize that this fake narrative was one of the many things that had complicated our relationship. The truth was bound to come out once our divorce was finalized. Doris, who held Bruce on such a high pedestal, would likely never expect the truth, that he hadn't worked at the prestigious company she thought he did for over a year. Bruce had actually left his job after a major mistake led to a demotion, a pay cut, and a public apology. He'd kept that secret from his mother, knowing how disappointed she would be. The blow had shaken him deeply. Her overprotectiveness made the situation even worse. He couldn't bear the thought of facing her wrath or returning to the office environment where he'd failed. So, he began calling in sick, eventually stopping altogether. His absences piled up, and he was fired. Since then, Bruce hadn't looked for another job. Instead, he'd been living off my income, all while keeping the truth from Doris, who would be furious if she found out. I felt a strange mix of regret and relief at the thought of Doris's inevitable reaction once she learned the truth, but at the same time, that was no longer my problem. When Bruce handed me the divorce papers, he told me they were just a formality, something to appease his mother. Okay, I said, processing the reality of what was happening. I signed the papers and found a new apartment. I moved out as quickly as I could. A month later, I was caught off guard when Doris called. I had thought I'd severed all ties with her, but my curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. What do you want now? Aren't you happy to be rid of me? I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You're still the same, Doris replied, her tone unchanged. She then went on to describe how she'd visited Bruce's apartment several times since I left. Each time, she'd found him lounging in his room, doing nothing, no job, no plans, no illness, just idle time. I suppressed a laugh, responding nonchalantly, well, Bruce isn't doing anything because he has no intention of working again. Doris, shockingly, didn't seem to catch on. Alexis, can you do something about it? She asked, as if I still had some sort of responsibility toward her son. Why should I? You didn't want me in your family. You made it clear you had no interest in me. I shot back, the irony of the situation not lost on me. I'd been mistreated for so long, and now she was trying to use me to fix her own mess. The whole thing was absurd. Doris, undeterred, then asked, I was wondering if you said something to Bruce before you left? I couldn't believe she was trying to pin the blame on me. Really, Doris? I replied, incredulously. You think I married Bruce just for his wealth? Why would I be upset about the divorce if that were the case? She eyed me suspiciously, as if she thought I'd only married Bruce for the lifestyle he supposedly offered. Are you kidding me? I shot back, my voice growing colder. I was the one supporting Bruce financially throughout our marriage. I was the one paying the bills. Thanks to him, I couldn't even live extravagantly. A thought crossed my mind, maybe I should have asked for alimony. Doris, stunned by my response, sputtered, How dare you make something like that up, Alexis? You just forgot to ask for alimony, didn't you? Bruce makes more than you. He's got a better job and a higher position. You're being unreasonable. If you want money, Bruce can pay whatever you want. He's a high-level employee at a major company, after all. Her argument was laughable, but I knew Doris was probably still unaware of the truth about Bruce's job situation. I don't want to gossip, but I feel it's time you knew the truth, I said, deciding to take the opportunity to set the record straight. Your proud son is a full-time house husband. He quit his job a long time ago. Liar. Doris's shriek was so loud, I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Check with his company, I suggested, my voice cool. You'll see for yourself who's telling the truth. For a long moment, Doris was silent. Then, her voice softened, almost nervously. Well, what if that's true? What are we going to do? I can't support him on my pension, and no one will want to marry him if he's unemployed. How are we going to manage? I couldn't help but grin at the sudden shift in her tone. It was almost poetic to see her so flustered after all the time she'd belittled me. What should we do? I echoed, a hint of amusement creeping into my voice. After a brief silence, Doris mumbled something to someone beside her. Then, in an entirely different tone, she suddenly pleaded, Alexis, please, come back home. Her dramatic shift caught me off guard, but I remained firm. No, we're already divorced. I wouldn't come back to your family if the world itself turned upside down. The finality in my words marked the end of a chapter one was more than ready to close. As I spoke, a commotion erupted in the background. Bruce's voice rang out. I told you I'd come for you when things settled down. Doris quickly responded, well, you could remarry my son, if you wanted. I was taken aback. What are you talking about? I asked, bewildered but resolute. No way, not for the world. Don't even joke about it. Thanks, but seriously, no. I made it clear to Doris that there was no chance I would ever rekindle anything with her son, or entangle myself in the toxic dynamics of their family. I was done with Bruce and his overpowering devotion to his mother. I did what you asked, so please stop changing your mind, Doris retorted, though the tension on the line was palpable. She added, it's not like you should take my words so seriously. You've been quite dismissive, haven't you? Well, I didn't think you'd actually go through with divorcing my son, Doris continued, her tone a mix of disbelief and surprise at my firm rejection. In response, I calmly explained, I was just tolerating the situation. Besides, Bruce packed up my things and essentially kicked me out without my consent. I vented my frustration, reminding her of all the manipulation she'd orchestrated. That was just a prank, Doris replied nonchalantly, as if it was no big deal. A prank? I said, exasperated. This is way worse than that. There was nothing left to say. I glanced at my watch, nearly 2 p.m. I'd already wasted my lunch break on this ridiculous conversation. Are you done now, Doris? I asked, eager to wrap up. What? She responded in a syrupy sweet tone, as if that would somehow change my mind. I knew better. I have another meeting in a few minutes and need to review some documents, I added firmly. As I started to hang up, Doris's voice rose. Wait, Alexis. Hey, Alexis. Say something. I could hear her shouting, but I had already disconnected the call, leaving the chaos behind. I was done with the turmoil and the endless manipulation. During our conversation, Doris had taken the opportunity to berate Bruce for mishandling the situation. She chastised him for the mess he'd created and blamed him for the fallout. It was clear she had no intention of taking responsibility for her own role in the mess. Exhausted by her behavior, I finally ended the call and blocked her number for good. Bruce didn't give up, though. He kept trying to reach me, seeing an opportunity for my own future. I consulted a lawyer about seeking alimony. Faced with the legal threat, Bruce's family, clearly anxious about the consequences, agreed to a lump sum settlement, but that didn't stop them from pressuring Bruce daily to find a job. It only deepened his frustration. Bruce eventually moved back into his parents' house because he could no longer afford his apartment rent. He blamed his parents for his predicament, and their finances, already strained, were now stretched even thinner by his return. Doris and Russell continued to blame each other for the mess they were in, never once reflecting on their own roles in the situation. They even started talking about applying for welfare, which seemed fitting. Perhaps, just perhaps, they would finally realize that their selfish behavior couldn't continue forever. As for me, the business proposal I'd worked on during my trip was accepted, securing a major contract for my company. This led to a promotion, a higher salary, and a more comfortable lifestyle. I was free from the torment of in-laws and the financial dependency that had weighed me down for so long. Reflecting on everything, I realized that if I ever considered marriage again, I would be thorough in my background checks. No more mama's boys, no more toxic families. I had learned my lesson the hard way.